Good evening. Welcome to the Kelly Wright Show from the nation's capital. Welcome, one and all. I hope you enjoyed your weekend. There's been a lot of talk about the big win that former Vice President Joe Biden gained in the South Carolina Democratic primary. And as predicted, the African-American vote loomed large and was the deciding factor for Mr. Biden's defining moment. Well, we'll break that down, the political landscape that now lies ahead, plus your headlines, all that and more in just a moment. But first, something else happened over the weekend that must not be overlooked or marginalized. The 55th anniversary of the March on Selma, Alabama. And that is the subject of my opening observations. What led up to the Selma to Montgomery March? Well, it was prompted by the death of civil rights activist Jimmy Lee Jackson, who died after he was brutally beaten and shot by an Alabama state trooper, who viciously beat and shot him. In response, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and hundreds more made their journey on March 7, 1965. Their first attempt to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge would become known as Bloody Sunday, when police attacked them with billy clubs and tear gas. The marchers were blacks, whites, Christians, Muslims, and Jews who shared in the struggle for equality and win the voting rights struggle for African Americans. Abraham Joshua Heschel, a Polish-born American rabbi and leading Jewish theologian and philosopher, said this of the march: "For many of us, the march from Selma to Montgomery was about protest and prayer. Legs are not lips and walking is not kneeling. And yet our legs uttered songs. Even without words, our march was worship. I felt my legs were praying." To that end, Dr. King once said, "The only normalcy that we will settle for is the normalcy of brotherhood, the normalcy of true peace, the normalcy of justice." Now, as the series of marches from Selma to Montgomery drew to a conclusion on March 17th of 1965, President Lyndon Johnson addressed a joint session of Congress, calling for federal voting rights legislation to protect African Americans from barriers that prevented them from voting. This is what President Johnson stated. He said, "What happened in Selma is part of a far larger movement which reaches into every section in every state of America. It is the effort of American Negroes to secure for themselves the full blessings of American life. It is all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice." And with that, soon afterwards, on August 5th, 1965, the Voting Rights Act was signed into law, paving the way for Black Americans to vote freely without the threat of physical harm or death. As the song says, we shall overcome. In this case, we have. And those are my opening observations. And now, here are your headlines. Coronavirus is spreading rapidly throughout the United States. 2 deaths in the U.S. were reported over the weekend in Washington state. Officials believe the virus has been spreading across the country, undetected for the past 6 weeks. The FDA is expanding coronavirus testing by speeding up hospitals' abilities to test for it. The Democratic candidates have been critical of the Trump administration's response to the coronavirus. So far, former Mayor Mike Bloomberg released an ad Sunday criticizing President Trump's response. Saturday's Democratic primary whittled down the Democratic contest. Former Mayor Pete Buttigieg dropped out of the race after his poor showing in South Carolina. And billionaire Tom Steyer did the same thing. He spent a lot of money and time in the state, but came in a distant third. However, former Vice President Biden's big win in the South Carolina primary this weekend has breathed new life into his campaign heading into Super Tuesday. Sunday marked the 55th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. Many of the presidential candidates were on hand to mark the occasion. You recall that historically on the first day of that march, Congressman John Lewis was beaten on that day as a civil rights activist. He is currently battling cancer, but showed up to speak to the crowd.
I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give in. No! I'm going to continue.
Go ahead, John.
Stay strong. Your prayers now more than ever before. Stay strong. Let's do it. We can do it. We can do it. Selma is a different place. America is a different place.
Yes.
But we can make it much better. We must use the vote as a nonviolent instrument or tool to redeem the soul of America.
I know that's
Thank you
right.
very much. Good to see you.
And that's a look at your headlines. Back with more after the break. As we mentioned at the top of the show, my opening remarks, as well as in the headlines, the 55th anniversary of Bloody Sunday was held yesterday. Thousands gathered to march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, including our special guest and good friend to the Kelly Wright Show, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, who joins us now to talk about what happened in Alabama yesterday. But more importantly, I owe you some congratulations, I understand. You've been inducted.
Well, thank you. The National Voting Rights Museum inducted me into the Hall of Fame along with others yesterday, and it was really good.
Congratulations.
You know, on the 55th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March.
It's well deserved.
Well, thank you. You know, we have to continue to work. I think voting rights is so important, not only for Black Americans, but for all Americans, but particularly for African Americans as we commemorated the price we had to pay.
Right.
To get the right to vote.
That's right.
Some people died, some people bled, some people were injured. John Lewis, that's icon.
Let's talk about that,
because
he was
up.
there yesterday.
He showed
Congressman
up,
John Lewis.
you know, and he's struggling with cancer, but he got up out of his situation and came to Selma. I mean, there were tens of thousands of people there yesterday. And of course, John Lewis was lifted up so the crowd could see him, this living icon of what the voting rights movement is all about, what the civil rights movement is all about. John Lewis, the Honorable John Lewis, still a member of Congress. We're so glad to see him. And all of us walked across that bridge. And Kelly, the bridge has an incline. And when you get to the top, you start going down. And you have to remember what John Lewis and Jose Williams and others were facing. They are marching down off the bridge knowing that the Alabama state troopers are waiting for them with billy clubs and horses and dogs. Yeah. But their courage is the reason why we have the 1965 Voting Rights Act now. Of course, it has to be reaffirmed because the Supreme Court weakened some of the sections of the Voting Rights Act.
Why do we go through that? I mean, that nags me, and I'm sure it nags other African Americans and other people of color who have to keep going through this.
Right. Well, you know, it's Frederick Douglass said it right. Freedom is a constant struggle. And when you win a victory, you have to hold on to it, or else people will take it away from you. And I think that voting rights now for Black Americans is something that we're going to be vigilant about, not just on Super Tuesday, not just on Super Monday, but every day is a super voting day for us.
Especially when we see how vital and precious our vote is, and that people, as you mentioned, died so that we could have this right to vote.
Absolutely. In 2020, there's no question about it. Hands down, the Black vote will determine who the next president of the United States will be.
And you're not the only one saying that. Tom Steyer, who of course dropped out of the Democratic race after South Carolina, Vice President Joe Biden says it. We know that Mike Bloomberg is courting the African American vote. We even know that the President of the United States
I was going to say President Trump is
courting
because everybody knows how pivotal, how determinative the Black vote will be in 2020.
And why have we become so important in terms of our vote?
Well, first of all, the demographics. The Black population in America continues to grow. The Latino population continues to grow. The browning of America has been accelerated. And of course,
and many people fear that. Why? Because
well, they shouldn't fear.
They shouldn't fear that.
You know, diversity is the strength of democracy.
Yes.
Not its weakness. And of course, the browning of America is really going to make America better, more rewarding, more diverse. And I think that we should not have this fear. And I think that eventually that fear, I believe, will subside. But we have to keep pushing forward and not step backwards. You know, there's this tendency to go forward and then push back. Now we need to keep going forward.
And Doc, let's break it down a bit further. African Americans, Brown Americans, Asian Americans, they have all fought and shared their blood for this country on the battlefields that America has been involved in to protect our freedom. You know, the saying, freedom is not free. We have fought hard. We've been doctors, scientists, lawyers, educators, inventors, helping this country grow. So when you bring out the Browning of America, and I see a backlash against that with some people, not all, but some people, instead of embracing it, they choose to get bitter. But I believe that we must get better.
Absolutely, we have to get better and understand that fundamental democracy requires inclusion, not exclusion.
Exactly.
And so what's at stake now is not just the battle for black people, it's the battle for American democracy. Are we going to really have a democracy, a representative democracy where every vote counts, every man, woman, and child will have an opportunity to participate in the democracy? That's what's at stake. And I'm so proud of John Lewis. I'm so proud of the Civil Rights Movement. I grew up in the movement.
You did.
And yesterday when we walked together once again across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, it was a reaffirmation of our determination to keep pushing forward. And I was so many young people. There's a new generation of millennials coming up that I'm so proud of.
I love watching them.
Absolutely.
And I love their passion, their zeal, and how they're crossing over into the future by understanding their past.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Always good to have you. Congratulations again on the award.
Thank you.
You deserve it. And
God
it's my
bless.
good friend, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Always love having him on the Kelly Wright Show. And he represents the NNPA, which is the National Newspapers Publishers Association, as well as the Black Press USA. And a lot of times we can't get anywhere without the Black Press.
Well, we work together.
We work together.
Kelly Wright Show, the blackpressusa.com, we're together.
Helping the whole world.
Absolutely.
All right.
Making it better.
We'll be back with a lot more after this. Well, the results are in South Carolina with Joe Biden rebounding in a big way, but Bernie Sanders supporters are passionate about him. Let's listen.
Even if you're just speaking from a sociological standpoint, just kind of the rhetoric and the attitudes and the dissension that this current president, this current regime brings about is a detriment to everybody, and that's kind of what I'm looking to try to end.
I feel like he actually genuinely means what he says when he says he wants to help us. And I feel like if you're not genuine, then I'm not going to believe that you're really going to help us. Because most politicians just want to get elected. And then once they get in office, all of our problems are just like, well, forget them. We'll deal with this right now. You know what I mean?
All right, so those are supporters of Bernie Sanders, and joining with me now to weigh in on the entire campaign trail, Eugene Craig and Steve Held are here with a breakdown from Saturday's South Carolina Democratic primary. Gentlemen, welcome.
Appreciate it.
So we saw Biden do exactly what we predicted here, or you gentlemen actually predicted it last Monday, and now it's happened. So what happens next?
He takes that momentum and takes it into Super Tuesday. He ran it up in South Carolina. He showed his strength among black voters. The first time black voters got to express their willpower, their voting power. And, Super Tuesday's tomorrow, so let's see what happens.
Steve, what do you think about Super Tuesday?
Super Tuesday, I wouldn't be surprised if this momentum for Joe Biden did continue a little bit. We'll see how far it does take him, but I think it'll definitely serve as a surge.
But what about the Bernie factor and the fact that Bloomberg will be actually getting into this now? People have a chance to actually cast their ballots as well.
I think so. This is the thing. I believe Bernie actually does have a hard ceiling, right? And we're seeing that with every election that comes by. He's not only underperforming his 2016, but he's having very, very, very extremely low marginal gains, right? In 2016, he had 14% of the black vote in South Carolina. He only expanded that to 17% this time around, which is crazy, being that if you've been running for president since you were 5 years and built out this organization on revolution and whatnot. But the thing is this: I think Bloomberg being actually helps Biden because it gives options and help depress the Bernie vote. If it gets into a one-on-one, there is a chance that Bernie could surge.
Steve, let's not overlook the fact that Pete Buttigieg has stepped away from the campaign, suspending his campaign. Does that give some advantage to Biden?
I would think it would. Yeah, folks are mixed. Some people are actually saying they think it would credit Bernie Sanders. But I would disagree with you, Eugene, about Mike Bloomberg. I think he's going to be more likely to take away from the moderate votes. And one thing that was interesting I want to say is from the exit polls, 53, I've got it right here, 51% of voters polled said that they favor a return to more Obama-style policies. And presumably, it's a vague question. We don't know the words, but presumably that means from Trump administration policies. But also, what's more interesting to me is 53%, and this is from NBC, said that voters think the economy needs a major overhaul. And so that's not a moderate thing, and I don't know that Biden is necessarily the one campaigning on that, so we'll be interesting to see how far that takes voters.
Now, when you talk about the economy needs a major overhaul, that goes to the threat against President Trump, who touts the economy as being the one thing that he's helped spur on, especially as it relates to African-American unemployment, not only for African-Americans, but also Hispanic, Latino Americans. Now, California, as you know, is rich with a lot of Latino votes. Do you think they will actually swing towards Bernie because he did so well in Nevada and had a good percentage of Latin American votes?
I think it's going to be interesting to see, right? Because I don't think Nevada is a good barometer because there are only 10,000 Latino votes in the whole. Good point. And the whole.
But some
caucus.
people have looked at that, thinking that it is a barometer. But as you've just narrowed it down, it's not a whole lot of votes.
It's not a huge sample, right?
Right.
I mean, California's going to have 6-7 million voters, maybe more. And so the thing is that I think it'd be a real test to see what happens with Latino voters in California and Texas. North Carolina, there's a good growing Latino population there as well. And so but I think that we live in a 24-hour news cycle, and so it was a good talking point. But as we saw with the talking point that, oh my gosh, Bernie's going to take the young black voters, that didn't happen in South Carolina. So I think the Bernie myths are starting to be dispelled as more elections happen.
It's still too early to tell. And Steve, just real quickly, the delegate count, Bernie is still in the lead, but as we just heard from Eugene, he's got a hard ceiling. Will he hit that hard ceiling, and we'll see Joe Biden emerge?
I'm optimistic that he won't, but this might be my personal biases showing through. But regarding the 10,000 being a small sample, if you do social science research and you can get 10,000 respondents to your study, that is more than enough to make projections.
Hold that thought, gentlemen. Hold that thought. We're going to come back with more of Eugene and Steve and talk more about the campaign trail and the politics of it all. Back in just a moment.
Perfect.
Back now with Eugene Craig and Steve Held as we're discussing the campaign trail. Tomorrow is Super Tuesday. Give me your forecast, your prognostication of what's going to happen. And who can tell at this point, right?
So I think Biden's going to be competitive. I think there's a promising poll that came out that showed he's polling around 21% in California, which is going to be very good to help depress Bernie's delegate count. I think Bloomberg picks up Oklahoma, Arkansas, probably North Carolina, and maybe North Carolina. He's running in a three-way there with Biden and Bernie. I think Bernie does really well. I think he hits threshold all over the map. I do think we see Amy Klobuchar suspend her campaign after tomorrow.
I'm surprised it didn't happen already.
Well, I think, look, she faced a situation where her home state is on Tuesday.
Right.
And so it really doesn't make sense to drop out. And the other thing is that she could be a Bernie spoiler, and being that it's her home state, depress Bernie's delegate count there.
Now, Steve, that's he mentioned something about being a Bernie spoiler. Do you think the Democratic machine is getting with these candidates and saying, why don't you drop out, let Joe have the lead, let's push him towards the top? So that we can avoid a brokered convention, get Joe resoundingly supported, and have a win?
I wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, I can't say that they are or not, but they were similarly in favor of Hillary Clinton in the last election as well. To what length you want to believe those allegations and things. So I think that would definitely simplify things because they are very uncomfortable about the idea of Bernie.
But as we look back on that plan that the Democrats had in the last election, it didn't work out too well. And that was because of the candidate not having enough to go over the threshold and truth be told, she was advised by the sitting president of the United States, get out and vote in states, or actually get out the vote in other states, and she didn't show up.
Yeah, she didn't show up in Michigan or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania.
So my question is, does Biden have enough to actually get out there and do it?
Absolutely. And there's coalition around Biden right now. I mean, he's leading with the national popular vote. He's actually leading, when you take all the delegates into play, he's actually leading with like somewhere like 130 delegates when you take the super delegates that are pledged to him into account. But I do think that there were a lot of lessons in 2016 that were learned. For example, I do think that you're not going to see a Tim Kaine as a VP. You'll probably see, a black woman. I don't think that if Adana Brazil goes to the DNC and say, hey, I need money for black media, they aren't going to give her a hard time on it the way they did in 2016. And look, there are some things that Team Biden has to get their act together. Jim Clyburn went on record saying that, Biden's team is screwing this up. And that's why he stepped in and came in to help and whatnot.
Steve, I see you smiling with that. Tell me about it. Give me your thoughts.
Look, I'll say one thing about the idea of electability and things. Donald Trump, during the campaign, was unelectable, full stop, according to almost the entire nation, seemingly, and he won. So conversations about electability, I think, we got to be very careful about that. So there's a lot of fear that Bernie isn't electable, but Trump was not.
But the thing is this, right? The issue with Bernie is that he's a Democrat, when he's running for president, right? This country is still a center-right country for the most part, and that revolts against socialism. The easiest fundraising pitch anybody has that's running as a Republican right now is literally to point to AOC and say, oh my gosh, help me stop socialism, and they raise $100,000. The thing is this, Bernie gets up on that, Bernie has not put in the hours to help down ballot. He hasn't deployed his machine. Folk like Joe Biden and Michael Bloomberg in the last cycle helped flip those 40 seats to take back control of Congress. And the thing is this, if Bernie's top of the ticket, there's going to have to be a real conversation around, do the Democrats want their ticket led by a socialist, and want Trump, essentially tagging Bernie with his praise of dictators across the world,
exactly,
and the conditions that the people that these dictators rule over live in.
Steve, I gotta bring this home. The main thing is, what will African Americans have to do to find the candidate who will actually get out there and do something for them?
That's a big question. We're going to have to wait for Super Tuesday, I think. But I've said this before on your show. I think what you've got to do is you got to go back and look at the track record and decide for all the voters, right? We've got to say whatever our issue is that's most important to us, what is the track record of the people that we're looking at, and we got to really weigh that out.
So that pretty much coalesces around what Democrats want. Eugene, what do Republicans want?
They are canceling their primaries left and right and just pledging their delegates to Donald Trump. He'll probably have his nomination wrapped up by the end of March.
And will the President of the United States be able to relate to African Americans?
No. But I will say this. They are making a play, and
they're making a strong play. Yeah,
but the thing is this: you don't get to slap me around for 40 years and then look and say, "Oh my gosh, look what I did for you in the last 2 years," without apologizing for it.
We'll have to leave it on that note. Eugene Craig, and he's a Republican, by the way, and Steve Held, the Democrat extraordinaire, and here to weigh in on this campaign issue. Obviously, you'll be back because we've got a whole lot more campaigning to do. And, of course, after Super Tuesday, we'll know exactly where this is going to go. Back with a lot more after this. Kevin Cottrell Ross is a pastor, spiritual life coach, social justice activist, and author of Courageous Conversations, a journal for passionate, purposeful, and powerful living. He is the senior minister of Unity of Sacramento International Spiritual Center, where he is dedicated to inspiring and empowering people to be a force for good in the world. Kevin, thanks for being my guest today on the Kelly Wright Show.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for having me. I'm so delighted to be with you this morning.
I'm delighted to have you. Tell me about your book and why you wrote it and why now.
For the past 20 years, I've been on a mission to inspire and empower everyday people to live extraordinary dreams. And what I've discovered over the last 20 years working with people from all over the world, is that the difference between those that achieve and those that don't achieve the things that are in their hearts to achieve is their inner conversation. And I found that there's a common missing conversation for most people that they need to tap into, and it's called courage. And that courage is what I see helps people to move beyond ordinary to extraordinary. And that's why I've taken the time to create the Courageous Conversations Journal, so people can really revamp their inner conversations and confront themselves with the most important, what I call big questions, to engage them in moving themselves out of a mundane, mediocre existence to a life of purpose, passion, peace, and prosperity.
I love all of that, all the above, and having the courage to come out and actually do that. Now, you've also embarked on a 30-day challenge called Courageous Conversations. So for the next 30 days, Kevin, how should I, you, all of us go about conducting our courageous conversations with people for empowerment and inspiration?
You know, we have not just started a new year, we started a new decade. And so I'm declaring this a decade of dreams come true. And so if we're going to take on these courageous conversations, I want to create a context in which we can do it, because what I found is that when we go alone, we can get pretty far, but when we go together, we can create extraordinary results. And so the Courageous Conversations 30-day challenge is a social media challenge in which individuals get the journal themselves and walk themselves through 6 important prompts where they hold each other accountable for their growth every day. That's one of the things that stops us, is that we may be making movement, but we may not be making progress. But I find that when we have accountability partners to support us in our challenges, we do extraordinary things. And so the 30-day challenge takes us through these 6 powerful prompts that we take ourselves through over 30 days. That's just, it's a game changer.
And what are those prompts?
Now you have to have the journal. But each day there's an important question that you engage yourself with from sunrise to sunset. 3 questions in the morning, 3 questions in the evening. So before you get out of the house, there are 3 important questions you want to engage yourself with. And then in the evening, 3 more questions. You cannot finish the challenge if you have not completed all 6 questions.
Okay.
And so that's what makes it a challenge, because every question stretches you into your greater yet to be.
I love that. It stretches us to becoming our better selves. Now,
Yes.
you're also a Morehouse man, and
Yes.
you are a graduate of Morehouse. And tell us about that, because, of course, a lot of people know that Morehouse is the alma mater of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So many great men who have gone through there.
You know, I went to Morehouse because when I was growing up, Superman or Spider-Man wasn't my hero, but Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When I was a kid, people would come over to my house, literally before we played with Hot Wheels or Matchbox cars. I had a bookshelf that I turned around backwards, and I turned it into a podium, and they had to hear me give speeches from Dr. King that I had memorized. And so the closest I could get to following in Dr. King's footsteps was going to Morehouse College, where I was inspired with not only him, but his mentors like Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, who said, strive to do what you do so well that no man living, no man dead, or no man yet unborn can do it any better. Or my mentor, Dean Lawrence Edward Carter Sr., the Dean of Chapel at Morehouse, who said to me, always hold your views with a tentative confidence. Is what you learn after you know it all that really counts. And so it was a profound, life-changing experience that prepared me for leadership as an African American in society. How do you lead? And with your morals intact, with the commitment to service in the community. So Morehouse was a phenomenal game changer, and of course, it's the crown of all HBCUs.
Well, Kevin, I can't thank you enough for being a part of us. Kevin Ross, actually Pastor Kevin Ross of the Unity of Sacramento International Spiritual Center there in Sacramento, California, which of course is the state capital of that wonderful state. Come back on the show anytime, especially bring your positivity and your inspiring quotes and all the things that you're challenging others to do. So I'm going to have that courageous conversation with you from now on. We'll keep in touch, and we'll keep doing this to help change the world one by one.
Yes.
Thank you,
One at
Kevin.
a time.
All right.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
All right, peace out. God bless you.
Peace.
Back with a lot more after this. Welcome back. Let's talk about health for the mind, body, and soul. David Gurton has helped hundreds of women gain their confidence and lose thousands of pounds with a very holistic approach founded in mastering the fundamentals. That's a positive mindset, sustainable eating habits, quality rest, and managing our stress. And David's here to join us now to teach us how we can soulfully dive into this and get ourselves healthy. Tell me all about it.
So, I mean, the first thing that we want to do is we want to start with the foundation, right? The foundation begins with our feet. So women, we see women walking around all the time.
Wait a minute, I got to ask you, the feet.
Go ahead, the
because
feet.
women like their feet.
They love their
and
shoes.
They like to wear those high heels.
Absolutely.
So tell me what a foot coffin is.
So a foot coffin is that shoe. It is that high heel. When you see those red bottoms, it's a foot coffin. Because think about it. When their feet are in these shoes, their feet are just like this.
Yeah.
They can't move. So imagine if we put those on our hands and we couldn't move our hands all day. You couldn't move your fingers. You'd literally come out of them and you could barely move them. The same thing is happening with the feet. So they're losing their connection to the way we're supposed to move. They can't do this. Think about when a baby is in a car. What's a baby do in the backseat of the car? Kicks his shoes off.
Yeah.
Because it's not natural.
Yeah. How important is it to keep our hips healthy?
Our hips. So we know
that's a man problem and a female problem.
That's a problem
all
in
the way
general.
around.
One, because we're sitting too much.
Yes.
That's the problem. Our hips get tight. We're not going through the natural movements that we should be doing. So I always tell people, because we sit at home, we sit on the couch, then we go get in the car, we sit down. We commute, we go to our desk, we sit down. So once you get to your desk, make it a practice of getting up every 20, 25 minutes. Get up and actually do some squats.
And that's a good spot for us to take a break so I can stretch a little bit. We're going to come back with more of David right after this and give you some more good tips on how to stay healthy. Don't go nowhere. In fact, take a break right now and stretch for 1 minute, 2 minutes, and come right back. All right. And welcome back. We're back now with David Gurton. We're continuing our conversation on how to soulfully lose those nagging pounds and get you off the emotional weight loss roller coaster as well. Welcome back, David Gurton. I just want to finish something real quick. We were talking about our hips. And as Shakira says, the hips don't lie.
The hips do not lie.
If you got a problem with your hip,
it's going to mess up your back.
Yes.
It can mess up your shoulder. It can mess up your neck. It can mess up so many things, and it's because we're sitting way too much. They call sitting now, they call it the new smoking, because we're sitting all the time. And now we're sitting and we're looking at cell phones. So not only are we tightening up our hips, but we're messing up our spine. Like we're causing ourselves all sorts of problems.
and depending on what we're reading on social media, we could be messing up our minds.
And messing up our, no doubt.
Yeah, because
Yes.
not all of that is good. Okay, so let's talk about something else then, because if our hips are messed up and our feet are jacked up from the kinds of things we put on our feet to wear, then what does that do to our weight?
Well, you know, the weight, it can affect the weight, but the weight really goes, that's a whole nother conversation. You have me back. That's a whole nother conversation about food. You know, food is, what we put in our mouths is like the most important decision that we make during the day, and that's where it starts. And then stress, sleep, and then the movement is going to be as far as affecting your weight.
So what do you recommend for losing the stress and the anxiety? Because I mean, I do a thing every morning. I pray, and then I get up and I pray some more. And I get up and I pray some more. And I'll work out, I'll do some yoga, and then I'll look at my girth and say, okay, there's certain things I've got to do throughout the day to eat accordingly. so I can lose more weight, gain more momentum, gain more energy, and get rid of inflammation?
My number one tip is going to be get outside.
Get outside.
As much as possible. So
take a walk.
Take a walk. So like 308 days ago, I started walking a mile a day. And everybody can't walk a mile, so walk a quarter of a mile. But just get outside, because vitamin D deficiencies are on the rise. Yeah. We're sitting too much.
And speaking of vitamin D deficiencies, it affects Black Americans and
more than anyone.
More than anyone.
More than anyone.
We don't get enough vitamin D.
We're sitting under artificial lights. We're looking at artificial lights all day long. We only go outside to get to where we're going, instead of actually spending that valuable time outside. Like you said, you pray. We need to get outside and commune
That's what
with nature.
That's my praying, walking outside in nature. But I got up to like 5 or 7 miles, and then once we started this show, I got to get back to it.
Yeah.
But it's so refreshing and healthy, and I even have meetings while I'm walking.
I do walking meetings. There's nothing, when you get outside, there's nothing that feels better. It turns on so many good hormones in your body. You have the birds singing, you have the wind blowing, the sun, the clouds, the stars. It's just unbelievable.
We got a member of our staff, and I never say staff, my family. Got a member of my family who produces a show, and she walks and she walks and she goes on long hikes.
Yes.
We're going to have her on one day to talk about her outdoor activities, because if we get out more, we can embrace this good earth that God made for us.
I talk about hikes with her all the time, because I take a group to hike every month.
So
just
you're the one.
Well, she does her own. She does the longer hikes. I do short hikes, but I take a group of people out that have never been. They've never been in the forest. Like there's Black people that have never been in the forest, and they get out there and they're like, wow.
Yeah, and growing up in the city as well as the country, I had a mixture of both, city, country, city. But there are a lot of kids who grew up in the inner city and they've never seen a forest.
They've never seen some of the animals. They haven't seen the birds. So getting out there and people are like, what's that noise? And somebody said, that's a woodpecker. Like they've never heard that.
Right.
And it just turns on this playful hormone that we need to have.
Brings a kid out in you.
Yes.
And then you can imagine more, you can become more creative and more productive when you show up for work or for that job.
You hit it right on the nose.
Yeah.
You're gonna get more creative. All the ideas are gonna flow, because the God force actually gets to come through you when you're outside.
All right, his name is David Girton, and you've been fitness aware now.
All right.
So I'm gonna call you my fitness guru.
All right, my man.
I'll be back with a lot more after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. My next guest is an up-and-coming comedian. Welcome, Leon Scott.
Thank you, Kelly. How are you?
To join us. I'm fantastic, man. I try to stay fantastic all the time.
All right.
But comedy is always a good lift for me and for all of us, because we need laughter, especially when we're dealing with so much out here in life.
Yeah, definitely. It is a trying time for everybody. It's a very stressful time for a lot of folks. But, levity, humor, I try to bring that.
You bring it well, but you write for a very popular show here in the district, and it's actually, I can mention, it's on a local news channel here, Channel 9, and it's called Get Up DC.
Yes, sir.
Got a fantastic talented crew there, Reese and Tony Perkins, and the young lady's name is?
Annie Yu.
Tell them all I said hi.
Absolutely, they're awesome people.
And they can support the Kelly Wright Show anytime, because we're sure enough supporting them as well.
Oh, yeah.
Seeing good positive energy that comes on that show every morning.
Yeah, man.
But you write the comedy.
Yeah, I'm one of the writers on the show.
So
yeah,
give me your comedic take on the South Carolina primary.
Oh man, I'm glad it's over. Number one, it was kind of stressful time. There's a whole lot of you see, it was more stressful for other people like Pete and Tom Steyer. Tom Steyer backed it up on out the election. And Pete.
Pete, what about Pete?
I mean, white flag waved it. True, yes, I don't know. I don't know what else to say other than like, I mean, I don't want to say anything too disparaging on a live television, but yeah,
we won't go there.
Wasn't a fan.
We want to be nice on the Kelly Wright Show and treat people with respect. But as you look ahead to politics, why does politics draw so much out of comedians?
Oh, because people are very passionate about it, number one. And number two, you can't talk about it at work, so we can get to say it at the comedy club, so we can express the things that you guys can't say, at work without potential for getting called into HR. So we can say it. Well,
when you're best,
but responsibly, of course.
Responsibly, your best behavior. Yes. Give me a little bit of what you would do. I mean, are there challenges as a black comedian talking about comedy?
Yeah, I mean, there are, but then there aren't. I mean, there's advantages because your life, the stuff that we've been through as black folks, and the stuff and everybody's experience is different. But the thing is, there are so many shared similarities, and it's a gold mine for like mining insight and things that maybe the rest of the world hasn't noticed. Like like a lot of times when you do have like the privilege to not notice little like microaggressions and little things like that, you don't realize it's something that is it's frustrating folks, or it's also potentially hilarious. So there's a lot of things that you can find, a lot of like insight that's there, and everybody's story is different. So there's insight in everybody's different backgrounds. But
isn't it good that all of us learn to just take stock and laugh at ourselves?
Yeah, I mean that's the key, is to be able to enjoy life. You only get one, so you should enjoy it.
Might as well enjoy it. Your 24-hour news cycle, does it help or hinder you with your material?
Well, I mean, it helps with the TV show, definitely with Get Up DC. It helps writing for that because there's always something that I can try to mine and use. As far as on stage, not so much because it's topical, and topical stuff is cool for about a week and a half, and then the news cycles go going. So, and then these people are old news. Like if I made a joke about the mooch right now, nobody cares because the mooch was like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But at the time, like, oh, the mooch is hilarious. But now it's like, oh, whatever. Where do you write some new jokes? That's what people are gonna say.
I mean, I can't wait to see you on stage. You're with let's see, you have 2 new stand-up specials, Amazon.
Yes.
American Comic.
Yeah, it's called American Comic.
On Amazon Prime. District of Comedy.
Yeah, and District of Comedy is a documentary series. It's like on myself, another comedian, Haywood Turnipseed, who I do a show with every Friday right down the street from here at Draft House Comedy, and a comedian named Janet Tillery, who's a civil rights lawyer, I believe. And basically they follow us like talking about our careers outside of the stage, and then like about 20 minutes of the 30 is us on stage, and then about 10 minutes is like interview segments, and it's really well done. And American Comic is great too. It's just a ton of comics on that one too. So I'm on there, but you gotta look for me. But
okay, Leon Scott, thanks for coming back, please.
Oh, please
come back and show us some of your comedy. And
okay,
I'd love to have you on, and just an honor to have you, man.
It's a pleasure.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
All right.
Definitely.
He's Leon Scott, comedian extraordinaire, up and coming, doing some great things. And now for my final word. Throughout the show, at the top of the show, we talked about Bloody Sunday and how important that was for African Americans, and how it proved that the nation could come together to do the right thing, and that is to pass the Voting Rights of 1965. We have to keep revisiting that. Why should that be? We should always be able to have the right to vote. We died for it, we bled for this country, we earned it. Not as slaves, but as people who could come up from slavery, because you have to remember, we came here in 1619 as kings and queens, and we were brought into captivity, but we broke through that captivity by righting the wrongs of the past. So let's be sure that we never repeat those wrongs in the future. Our vote is valuable. Get out and vote. You've been righted and ignited, and now united to spread some love, freedom, and peace. And let your light shine. Peace out.
This is the light. 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 This is the light.
This is the light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This is the light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I want the world to know. This is the light of mine. I gotta let it flow. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. So happy to tell you that I am saved. sin. I'm living with the joy and the peace within. And this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.